I'm Andy Mills, and welcome back to Reflector. Last week, we dove into the largely forgotten chapter in American history where a violent tit-for-tat emerged between a fringe on the radical left and the government determined to quash them.
It set the groundwork for a combustible situation in those decades.
Various sort of assassination and bombing campaigns carried out by politically motivated individuals or by very small revolutionary cadres.
And this created a real opportunity for radical thinking to come in.
And if you've not heard that episode, I would advise you to pause this one right now, go back and check it out. Because today, we're going to revisit propaganda of the deed. And once again, I'm joined by Longview reporter Ethan Mannello. Hello, Ethan.
Hey, Andy.
And together, Ethan and I, we are going to share some of the reporting that we've been doing over the last several months, where we have been exploring this question of where there are and where there are not echoes between last week's story and today's fraught political climate.
And, there are obvious parallels between the post-industrial revolution era we talked about last time and what we're living through today. Then, just like now, technology was reshaping everything from the economy to people's social lives. There was massive amounts of immigration, an increasing wealth gap between the very rich and everyone else. And of course, then, just like now, there was a rise in radical politics.
And maybe most potently, all of this was accompanied by an outbreak in politically motivated violence, just like what we've been seeing in this growing list of attacks happening recently.
That chart's a couple of months old, and if you want to really see something that's sad, take a look at what happened.
For example, back in 2024, there were 2 attempts made by 2 separate would-be assassins to kill President Trump.
We begin with breaking news in Pennsylvania, where police are searching for an arsonist who set fire to the governor's residence.
In April of 2025, a man in Pennsylvania.
Police say around 2 this morning, someone set fire to Governor Josh Shapiro's residence.
Tried to burn down the home of Governor Josh Shapiro while he and his family were inside.
A horrific shooting in Washington, D.C. overnight.
Then in May,
2 Israeli embassy employees were shot and killed as they exited the Capitol Jewish Museum.
An activist in Washington, D.C. shot and killed 2 Israeli embassy employees
who yelled, "Free, free Palestine," after the shooting.
Then again, just a few weeks later in Minnesota.
Tonight, authorities calling this man, Vance Bolter, a cold-blooded killer after he allegedly stalked, surveilled, and shot 2 longtime Minnesota state.
A man went to the home of several lawmakers, killing Melissa Hortman and her husband, and shooting or targeting several others.
And David, investigators believe this was a complex and chilling plan to kill public officials. 45 lawmakers on that alleged target list.
And really, this list could go on. There was the attempted assassination of Nancy and Paul Pelosi, of Trump administration official Russell Vought, of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. But really, the political assassination that was both the most public and, for me, I thought the most revealing, was the shooting of activist Charlie Kirk.
Tonight, a new chapter in this era of political violence. Conservative political activist Charlie Kirk is dead, assassinated while speaking on a college campus in Utah.
Chaos and horror on a college campus. Conservative activist Charlie Kirk gunned down in front of a crowd at Utah Valley University.
And while in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's death, many public officials, even some who strongly opposed Kirk when he was alive, condemned his murder, there was a sizable amount of people who cheered over it.
I'm just really glad Charlie Kirk just got himself fucking shot.
I think the only thing that went wrong that day was that Trump wasn't standing behind him getting a secondhand bullet.
Now, this sort of response was not just confined to Charlie Kirk. I mean, you can find similar comments made about Paul Pelosi or Melissa Hortman. But I think what was clear was the intensity and the amount of these comments made was something remarkable and something that you couldn't ignore.
The guy who made a living spewing evil, hate-filled rhetoric died from getting shot right in the voice box. I might be 1% less atheist today.
And in what could be considered an echo in history, somewhat reminiscent of the crackdown on anarchist newspapers that happened in the early 1900s. Many of these individuals who were accused of celebrating Kirk's murder found themselves the target of a public and governmental backlash.
So when you see someone celebrating Charlie's murder, call them out. And hell, call their employer.
And according to different reports, it's a little tough to pinpoint the exact number, but somewhere around 600 people were either fired or faced other disciplinary action for their comments.
And while it's true that hyperbolic and offensive social media comments are nothing new, and they are something that social media algorithms actively incentivize, there is increasing evidence that a real change is occurring in the way that Americans think of political violence.
When you take a look at any recent polling from Pew, Politico, PBS, Marist, they all show the same trend, that Americans believe political violence is increasing and that support for political violence is also on the rise.
A recent poll that I was looking at from the independent research organization PRRI, they found that back in 2021, somewhere around 15% of people were saying that Americans may need to resort to violence to make lasting political change. And now it's somewhere between 23 and 28%.
I actually just saw another poll from PBS and NPR that had that number as high as 30%.
Right. So that means that depending on which poll you're looking at, 1 out of every 4 or maybe 3 out of every 10 Americans now holds this view.
Yeah, which is significant. And I think we both agree that one place where you can see this changing view playing out in real time is in the anti-ICE demonstrations, which are happening not only in Minnesota, but throughout the entire country.
As we discussed last week, since June in 2025, more and more Americans say that they disapprove of the tactics that ICE is using in their crackdown on illegal immigration.
Tonight, despite the brutal cold, a massive crowd of anti-ICE protesters flooding downtown Minneapolis.
And tens of thousands of Americans across the country have been participating in marches and protests demanding change.
No ICE, no KKK, no racist, fascist USA.
But as anger towards ICE has grown, so is the number of protesters willing to not just hold up signs at rallies, but to physically interfere with or even try and stop ICE operations.
We want to see you doing more than just being in the streets and actually fighting against the bosses for a revolution, for a system that caters to the workers.
And while it's hard to gauge just how many people across the country have made this shift and are now endorsing more interventionist strategies, like blocking cars,
We're here to protect our neighborhood. You guys are the ones here to destroy.
or surrounding ICE agents,
Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out. Nobody fucking...
the number of these confrontations has grown since the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy at the hands of federal agents in Minnesota.
Tonight, mayhem in a Minneapolis neighborhood.
Now, when it comes to the Americans who feel that Donald Trump or ICE or his whole administration have crossed a line and that we are now in a situation where they need to be resisted in a more aggressive way, there's obviously a very wide spectrum there. Some public officials who believe this have begun to refer to the president as an authoritarian or his administration as fascists. Some media figures, including some pretty mainstream voices like Kara Swisher or Scott Galloway, have said that we need to treat the current administration the way that the international community once treated the Nazis.
And I've said this. I think there should be something equivalent to the Nuremberg trials after this is all over.
I agree.
And to make it clear that once we're back in power, which we will be, this is going to happen.
People like Stephen Miller will go down in history as evil and should be jailed.
If you look online in comment sections or on X and Blue Sky, there has definitely been an uptick in the amount of people who are calling for revenge on ICE agents.
There is not a single ICE bitch on this planet, in this country,
who deserves to breathe air right now, and I firmly stand by that. We should be stringing them up in the fucking streets at this point.
You murder U.S. citizens in public. What do you think your punishment should be? Fuck hands and cuffs. I want heads on spikes. It's an eye for an eye over here. None of that fucking be the better person type shit.
I don't really care about the consequences anymore. I don't care. We need to kill these people.
And now I want to say again that when it comes to online comments like this, it is very hard to know how sincerely they are held by people who are maybe looking to get attention online, or how representative they are of a larger populace. Especially because when I have reached out to try and talk to many of these people, they've never agreed to go on the record with me.
However, when it comes to the changes that we are very clearly seeing on the ground in these anti-ICE demonstrations, and just what is happening within the protest movement, we were able to speak with someone who really embodies the change in both the tactics and the philosophy of the radical resistance.
Can we just start off by having you tell us your name and what organization you're with?
Shanta Driver. I am the national chairperson of BAM, By Any Means Necessary.
So Shanta Driver is an experienced attorney who's even argued in front of the Supreme Court. She's the national co-chair of By Any Means Necessary, or BAM, which is a proudly militant, far-left, direct action organization focused on civil and immigrant rights.
The name of the group is By Any Means Necessary because we mean by any means necessary. And most of the time, that means attending demonstrations. It includes intervening.
And when you say intervening, do you mean things that we see sometimes like surrounding ICE agents' cars, or maybe like blocking a road or something like that?
Yeah. And for some people, that means taking pictures. For other people, it means getting on big bullhorns and warning the whole neighborhood. For some people, they're prepared to surround an ICE vehicle and stop it from proceeding. But the main thing is that you have to act. We're not a talk shop. We want people to be involved in struggle and learn from their involvement in struggle how to be leaders.
And Shanta was clear that her organization and the allies of her organization have decided to take an intentionally different approach to public protest.
We are not inclined to do civil disobedience. We do not feel that furthers our cause. We don't think sitting and waiting to get arrested and then getting arrested achieves much of anything. But we do feel, on the other hand, that when necessary, we absolutely have the right to defend ourselves. And we will do that.
And just so I'm clear about the contrast that you're trying to point to here, I think people are familiar with the like Henry David Thoreau, Martin Luther King style of civil disobedience, where, you know, you maybe are breaking an unjust law, like eating at a whites-only lunch counter, or maybe you're, you know, chaining yourself to a doorway or something like that. And then when the cops show up, and, you know, whether they are bringing out the hose or Bull Connor is sicking the dogs on you, the idea is that you don't fight back, you get arrested, and when the cameras capture this injustice, the world can see who are the good guys, who are the bad guys. And the theory is that it helps to build sympathy for your cause and all that kind of stuff. But you're saying that that is not the underlying philosophy behind what you and your movement are doing on the streets right now, right?
That's exactly right. We take action against those dogs, and we take action against their handlers if they were attacking us. Absolutely.
All right, so I want to ask you about the protests that we've been seeing around the country, these anti-ICE protests that I know you've been a part of, going all the way back to the ones in LA in June. And am I right that you've also been, as a lawyer, defending some of the people who've been arrested in these demonstrations? Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
All right. Well, I wondered if you could speak to the people who are listening who maybe just saw these protests on social media and they just see these pictures where protesters are getting into fights with cops. Maybe they saw some of the videos of the burning Waymos in the streets of LA and they think, oh my God, things are getting out of control. Maybe we need to take the temperature down. What do you want to say to those people? What is the motivation that you want them to understand is behind these images? Are they supposed to be symbols of defiance? Are you in your organization essentially saying, look at how bad things can get if ICE doesn't leave now? Is it that kind of idea?
I think it's self-defense, and it's not, we don't do anything that's like symbolic. To tell you the truth, I think there are two sides to what people see when they look at that kind of social media. For the youth, it means we want to enter this fight because the people that we're fighting with are serious, are determined, and aim to win. And they don't see being able to win their freedom or preserve their communities through any other way but defending them. And then there are the people who say, oh, no, that looks shocking and terrible. And, we see videos all the time of the police beating up black people, and we think that's abhorrent, But
when we see protesters who are punching the police, that we treat them with a double standard.
As a double standard, yes.
And Shanta told me that to understand the escalation on her side of things, it's important to view it as a response to what she believes is an escalation in the stakes of our current political standoff.
So I would describe the current state of our politics as living under an increasingly successful fascist takeover.
And so am I right in thinking that you believe that the situation that we face right now is so dire that we cannot expect that, movements like the maybe the 2017 Women's March or similar kind of peaceful protests, that those are not going to solve the problem at hand, that maybe we're in some kind of an emergency, and emergencies, they just call for a different sort of response.
Yeah, this is an emergency, and it's an emergency that is spiraling. And if we don't act, the fascists, they'll proceed with the takeover.
So how much do you and your organization think about the way that this message that you're trying to send is landing with the everyday person who sees this on the internet? Because you are making a clear argument with me that we are living through a time that needs a forceful response. And I think that there are a lot of people who agree with that. But I think there's also a lot of people out there who long for the days when we could have, good faith, open debates about important issues, right? Immigration is a really important issue. I think most people agree that there should be some sort of limit on immigration, but there's a lot of disagreement about how you enforce those limitations, about what you do with people who are in the country illegally right now. And they think, well, why can't we just sit down and hash out our disagreements and come up with some kind of compromised solution? And then they turn on their phone and they see these videos of people, fighting on the streets and saying these horrible things to each other, of ICE agents, pepper spraying and tackling protesters and protesters who are fighting back against them. And they just think, oh my God, this is just further evidence of how much we need to go back to this world of open-minded debate. But it sounds like what you're saying is that those people are somewhat naive and that we're past that moment, in your view. Is that right?
That is correct. I mean, first of all, there's no chance of having open debate. We don't waste our time doing that. We have young people who we can organize and who want to fight, and that's our audience. Because those people who want to debate all of these different things and blah, blah, blah about violence and all of that, they don't mean to act anytime soon. And so it would be a waste of our time attempting to carry on some purposeless dialogue with them.
Right. The time for talk is over, you're saying.
The time for talk is over. Right.
And Shanta said to us that even if you don't like what you're seeing on your phone of confrontations between ICE agents and civilians, she believes that if she doesn't do what she's doing now, the future that Donald Trump is attempting to usher in will be much worse.
If we're not mobilizing against him, well, the future that is coming is going to be far more bloody, far more extreme, far more dangerous.
Now, while there are for sure some echoes in Shanta's views and in the views of the radical left from back in the late 19th and early 20th century, there are also really important differences.
We're not anarchists for sure. We don't subscribe to anarchist tactics. We think that small group terror actions never succeed and they can't change anything.
So Shanta says that while her organization is open to the anarchists who want to join them, they are decidedly not anarchists, and they reject the terrorism tactics of propaganda of the deed that were supported by leaders like Luigi Galliani back in the early 20th century.
And while there are anarchists participating in these protests, I mean, back in January, a self-described anarchist, Kyle Wagner, was arrested and charged with threatening to murder ICE agents. Reporting on these anarchists can be pretty tricky.
Right, and part of that is because the brand of anarchy or anarchist just isn't what it used to be. It's not really seen as this working class resistance fighting back against the system like it was back in the early 20th century. You know, we talked to a number of anarchists for the story. Many of them were academics. A lot of them said that the idea of anarchy has been somewhat co-opted by like teenage punk rock hot topic at the mall.
Yeah, it's more of a youthful pose than an actual political ideology.
Right, and that's even according to self-described anarchists. But when it comes to the protesters who are at these rallies, many of them prefer to use the label Antifa or anti-fascists. And I have reported on Antifa since 2017, and while I have met many of them and I've spoken to several of them, in almost 10 years, I've never been able to convince even one of them to go on the record with me. They just have a very strong stance against speaking to members of the press.
And on top of that, there's no reliable membership numbers on Antifa out there. Government sources describe Antifa as a decentralized ideological label rather than an organization that gets funding or that has membership roles.
Right, so it's hard to know even how big a movement they really are.
Exactly.
So one of the things that Ethan and I learned when we were digging into the history back in the 19th century, whenever there was this big tit for tat going between workers and the fringe left and the government, was that a group of anarchists believed that public assassinations would be a necessary way to galvanize people to rise up, to show them that they have more power, that if one man could take out a world leader, imagine what hundreds of thousands and millions of workers around the world could do. Are you saying you disagree with that as like a necessary or important feature in a movement?
Yeah, I don't think it's the necessary thing to do because it wouldn't solve the problem of fascism, because fascism is not a personality problem. It's a whole political worldview that you're trying to combat and win against. And no amount of individual assassinations of this or that people is going to accomplish that goal.
After a short break, we speak with those who do support political assassinations, or at least support a man accused of one, named Luigi.
Stay with us.
Hello, this is Matt, and this episode is sponsored by Ground News. Ground News is one of the most helpful tools that I use every day to avoid the echo chambers and media bias online. Here's an example of what I mean.
Roll the window down. Roll this one down. Roll that one down, too.
Chicago police pulled over a 26-year-old driver named Dexter Reed.
Don't roll the window up. Don't roll the window up.
Reed first failed to comply with police instructions.
Unlock the doors now. Unlock the doors now.
And then Reed pulled out a gun and shot at the officers,
Open the door now.
resulting in the police firing back aggressively. Now, when I came across this story on the Ground News app, they had done this great service. I could swipe between the headlines to see how different media outlets describe the same story in different headlines. So I would see the Washington Post headline, "Police fire 96 shots in 41 seconds, killing black man during traffic stop." Next to Chicago's local WTTW headline, "Officers fired at Dexter Reed 96 times in 41 seconds after he shot officer in arm." Right next to the Fox News headline, Chicago man opens fire on officers after failing to follow commands. On top of showing different headlines, they offer blind spot reports to show you stories outside your bubble. They collect local reporting on the city or town that you live in, and they rate news stories and outlets on their level of bias. To go check them out, use the link ground.news/reflector, and you'll get 40% off their unlimited access Vantage subscription. This is a great way to support them and the work they do because Ground News is a subscriber-supported platform. We appreciate what they're up to, and we appreciate their support of this podcast. So go check them out. And make sure you use our link, ground.news/reflector, so they know we sent you.
If there was a big red button that would just demolish the internet, I would smash that button with my forehead.
From the BBC, this is The Interface, the show that explores how tech is rewiring your week and your world.
This isn't about quarterly earnings or about tech reviews.
It's about what technology is actually doing to your work, your politics, your everyday life.
And all the bizarre ways people are using the internet.
Listen on bbc.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Reflector. On December 4th of 2024, at around 6:45 in the morning, United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, the 50-year-old chief executive of one of the country's largest health insurers, was walking through the streets of Manhattan when a man wearing a backpack and a black mask walked up behind him, pulled out a 9mm pistol with a 3D printed silencer on the barrel, and shot him in the back.
Police are telling us this looks to be a targeted attack. They just don't know why he was targeted in the investigation.
The shooter fled, and immediately a citywide manhunt ensued.
That shooter ran off down an alley and is still at large in New York City right now.
They say he then took a rented e-bike and continued north into Central Park.
And as the details of this killing began to spill out, it was clear that this was not just another tragic New York City murder.
The killer wrote the words depose, delay, deny on separate bullet shells found at the scene.
And quickly,
he left a very powerful message, and he highlighted how terrible the healthcare system is in America. I think he'll go down as a hero in history.
This mysterious killer was starting to be seen as a folk hero.
Today, the NYPD released 2 new photos of the man. One of the photos shows him smiling.
This only intensified when the suspect's photo was released, and people saw that he was a handsome young man.
He has been identified as Luigi Nicholas Mangione.
26-year-old Luigi Mangione.
And then when his identity was revealed,
he's a male, 26 years old.
He's a Maryland native with ties to San Francisco.
And people learned, just like the famed anarchist Luigi Galliani, this Luigi also had a surprising backstory.
This Ivy League-educated data engineer with no serious criminal history. Now he's been charged with the murder of
The attention around him grew even more.
This Ivy League hottie named Luigi is the Robin Hood that we never knew that we needed.
People started going through his writings on social media. They found his Goodreads reviews account. They learned about how he suffered from chronic back pain, how he had a bad experience with healthcare.
A manifesto was found and it referenced the healthcare industry and read in part, these parasites had it coming.
I listened to Luigi's manifesto this morning 3 times, and I cried.
Quickly, he had fans online that built websites devoted to him.
I never understood y'all writing letters to attractive men who were in jail until I saw Luigi. Smart. He reads books. I like him.
And they even raised over $1 million for his legal defense.
Dozens of Mangione supporters gathered outside the courthouse carrying handmade signs and chanting, "Free Luigi."
And while Luigi Mangione is still on trial, and he remains innocent until proven guilty, he has already become this fascinating lens through which we could try and see where we as a society are right now. From your point of view as somebody who was, studying this in real time, how quickly did he go from being a masked murderer to being seen as something more like a folk hero in some people's eyes?
So for me, that was immediate, right?
So this is Professor Anya Narjevska, who is a social media researcher from Georgia State University.
As a social media researcher, I'm there. I spend a lot of time online, so I am able to pick up almost immediate shifts in interest.
And she was actually monitoring the response to Brian Thompson's killing in real time.
And I saw a lot of people seemingly understanding as to why.
You could see the vibe was very much not sympathetic to a murder victim.
And this is her colleague, Professor Nicholas Creel.
That's just kind of odd. You look at it and you think, wow, that's not generally what you would expect from gun violence. Usually you see the exact opposite, a dramatic outpouring, sympathy for the victims. And so that was, to me, just looking at it anecdotally, thought, wow, that's odd. That's weird.
But quickly, these researchers saw that this wasn't just coming from a handful of outliers online.
It was very apparent from the start. This was not an isolated, small fringe level of support. This was very widespread. It was too permeating throughout all different aspects of society to be isolated or just these people who are really far out there.
And what really sparked their curiosity even further was when they saw that this response was coming not just from the left or the right, but from across the political spectrum.
And again, anytime you can see people who voted for Trump and for Biden both agreeing on something, that's odd.
There is a high degree of, I don't want to say support because I didn't technically measure support, but justification.
And these two professors, they ended up doing this study where they surveyed a couple hundred people who had said that they were familiar with the story of Brian Thompson's killing. And they asked them things like if they believed his death was justified or if the healthcare industry might now change for the better after his killing.
Because we didn't ask about support. You can't go and ask people, hey, were you good with killing this guy? But we can ask things like, well, do you feel empowered by this? Do you feel like it's going to lead to change? And what we saw was on the left and on the right, there were majorities of support for both of those.
And substantial number of people felt it was justified. When I say justified, I mean that the insurance industry, in some respect, is responsible for it, and the action, therefore, was justified.
36% of those surveyed said that the killing was justified, and over 60% said that United Healthcare was the party responsible for the killing. And they were surprised to learn that for many,
people felt empowered by this man's killing.
Before it occurs, you couldn't speak up, you felt like you had no voice, and now you feel like you have voice, and that this voice will actually change things.
So you're saying that the people in your sample group, they felt like what Luigi did, allegedly, that he was speaking for the masses, and now they felt inspired to speak up too.
Yes. And feeling like suddenly you can speak up and your voice will matter. They felt more empowered that their voice will matter more after the incident, whereas before they felt like it wouldn't matter if they spoke anyways because it's not going to change anything.
People saw that and they felt like she had said, this now makes me feel like I was powerless in this relationship previously, and now they're not going to treat me as badly. They're going to be afraid now of the masses.
And that's why you heard so many voices from so many people of different backgrounds.
And I wonder what you guys think about this, because you mentioned earlier that this felt like an outlier situation when you first started monitoring it. And I'm just curious if in your research, you think of what Luigi allegedly did, what he was able to inspire, if you think that that should be seen as a separate thing or as a connected thing to these other political assassinations that we've been seeing, or attempted political assassinations. You know, the attempted burning down of the house of John Shapiro, the man in Minnesota who killed these lawmakers. Do you see them as totally different, as connected? How do you read it personally?
Personally, I see them as pretty well connected. And a reason I would say that is, like, for example, societally, we know we're actually in a fairly non-violent time. Now, murder rates are down. Violent crime is down. And that's particularly from the highs of the 90s. When we see from there, it's a substantially safer time in the aggregate. But we do see some evidence now that this sort of violence directed towards the elites We're in a period where that is kind of ticking up right now, and we're seeing this direct evidence of it. And that is what the CEO of United Health represented, that elitist class that is running things against the masses, against their interests. And so people are very much more willing to talk about how pissed they are at the elites. And when they're doing that, and it opens up that conversation of, well, maybe Luigi didn't do such a bad thing, it starts to move the needle. The Overton window starts to open up, and people are more willing to talk about things that eventually make radicalization easier for when that one individual who is willing to do something that, I wouldn't do, but they're more willing now to go do it when they see the tenor and tone of the conversation change.
Are you guys here for the trial? Do you mind if I ask you a couple questions?
Maybe, depends on what they are.
Okay, so just so you know.
So for months now, I've been talking with lots of so-called fans or supporters of Luigi, some of whom were standing outside of the courtroom during one of his hearings.
Free Luigi. I understand what he did for sure. He did what he did. I understand what he did. Because for me, a lot of people's going through stuff like that too. So.
Well, obviously I don't condone violence and murder, but I think things are getting to kind of a fever pitch in this country.
And a lot of what I heard there backed up this theory from Professor Creel, that this support and the rallying around this case has a lot to do with the tension between those who are viewed as the powerful and the elite and everyone else in society.
Where people are fed up with the 1% and corporate greed and all these things and the outrageous cost of healthcare and health insurance, and then they don't even cover it, and you're paying however many hundreds of dollars a month, People are sick of it. It's ridiculous.
There is a lot of discussion that needs to be had about the system, as people are coming to call the oligarchy.
This was also true when I spoke to Luigi's online fans from places like the Free Luigi Reddit forum.
It's definitely opening up a broader conversation that probably should have been brought up long before now.
And I should say, many of them were very quick to say to me that they were not personally comfortable with the idea of outright supporting political assassinations per se.
There's a difference between promoting violence and understanding why somebody was violent. I myself, for example, would never go shoot somebody, right? But I can understand why, if somebody got so mad at the healthcare system that they wanted to shoot a CEO, I can understand that. It may not be the action that I would take, but I can understand it. So I don't promote anarchy. I don't promote violence. I don't encourage people to go out and do these horrible things like this. But when it happens, I feel like we should take that opportunity to say, I understand why that happened.
So what do I think about the crime in and of itself? I cannot pass judgment on that. What I do know is that it united the conservative and liberal and radical bases in a way that I know shook the institution, and that is something that I'm grateful for.
Everything that's happening in this case is a really example of pretty much every intersection in society of the grander problem. Put the system on trial.
And almost all of Luigi's fans or supporters that I met, whether it was outside of Luigi's hearing or the ones I was talking to online, they agreed that the movement that began with the killing of Brian Thompson is here to stay.
And do you think this case and kind of the rallying that normal people have had around this case is indicative of something larger that's kind of happening in the country, and this shows that?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, I do.
And what do you think that is? What kind of movement do you think that is?
I mean, it starts with protesting. You hear around the block that protesting doesn't work. So then what's the next logical step?
What do you think the next logical step is?
Well, direct action, probably, sadly.
Do you think we're getting to a point in this country where violence might be needed to kind of change the system and resist the status quo?
Yeah, I do. Unfortunately, no real change has come about historically without some of that. So, and that's unfortunate, but if the people in power aren't willing to change their ways, then, people are gonna snap eventually.
I do. I feel like this is about to be we approaching another civil war. With Donald Trump being president, the government fake its own little gang now. It's really the government versus the people. It's not even the people and the government versus other countries. It's countries versus the government versus the people. Civilians, we by ourselves. The government not helping us.
We're literally in a war with a system right now that is killing us. And very difficult in war to really decide what is right and what is wrong, because defending yourself. If ideally, I really would wish we could stop this violence. But I won't be sanctimonious and say that I don't understand people's collective frustrations.
Whenever you go against the system, it's violence. We saw in Minneapolis the other day, a woman was given 2 conflicting orders by 2 officers trying to move out of the way, allegedly fleeing the crime. Now it's violence, right? It was defense of their life. So anytime you don't do exactly as a fascist dictatorship regime says, you are doing violence. It's like a catch-22. Anytime you stand up against what's going on, you're going to be labeled as violent.
Maybe we should talk about whether or not it's true violence never solves anything. Because our country is full, America is full of examples where violence has solved something. Literally, our founding fathers were shooting their own military soldiers from guerrilla warfare positions, and that was considered cowardly, and they were considered traitors. And now we put statues to them and call them heroes and the founding fathers. So time will tell whether or not this was a justified thing or not. But to label everybody as, terrorist sympathizers. We've gotten to a place in this country where somebody wants to shoot a healthcare CEO and then people are celebrating that in the streets. Maybe there's a bigger conversation to have. How did we get that way as a country? What did we do wrong as a country that got to a point where that was acceptable?
And finally, one of the most surprising things I learned when I was talking to Luigi's fans and supporters was, in their view, when the Trump DOJ and Pam Bondi announced that they were seeking the death penalty against Luigi, his supporters saw that as an act of propaganda of the deed, not what Luigi did. In their eyes, it was the government trying to use his death to send a message.
If allegedly he did it, why the death penalty? What is the messaging? That's why I'm so concerned. Let's call it. I am extremely concerned.
But what do you think that messaging is?
They put him in this spot as to use his image as a lesson. They're just taking the opportunity to make sure that, since the suspect seems to be so well liked, don't step out of line. Because if you do, this is what could happen to you.
If he is convicted and, is even possibly put to death, do you think he would become a martyr, in a sense, for a larger cause?
I think it would be very unwise for them to give us a political martyr of that level. It would be terrible. It would be terrible. I think that it would unleash politics in a very specific way. I think it would be unwise to put him to death. I really think that is the least smart, politically astute decision that you could make as a politician. I think you're right. They would make a martyr, and a very handsome one, that would live forever on every building and would be graffitied on every t-shirt. And in an effort to curtail vigilantism and acting out on one's own, they would actually create the very copycats they seek to destroy. I think it would be the most unwise thing in the world.
On January 30th of this year, the New York Southern District Judge in Luigi Mangione's trial announced that they'd come to the decision that Luigi should not face the death penalty. The Justice Department, as of taping this, has not yet announced if they will appeal that verdict. And so as for where we're at right now, whether we are living through an echo in history, what comparisons can and can't be made between Luigi Galliani and Luigi Mangione, there is a lot still to be debated. But one thing is clear, that for a growing number of Americans who either oppose Donald Trump and his administration or the ruling class more broadly as they see it, many of them strongly believe that things are going to get worse before they get better. Fast forward 5 years from now, what does it look like if you and your organization are successful? And what does it look like if you fail?
5 years from now, I would guess that if we fail, we'll be in concentration camps, if not dead. And if we succeed, we'll have ousted the Trump government.
Thank you for listening to Reflector, where we always strive to give listeners the backstory and the context to the beliefs and debates shaping our world. We hope that, like us, you find these stories both useful and fascinating. And if so, please share them with your friends and family. And if you've got a second, give us a rating on Apple or Spotify, as that really helps new people discover this show. As always, to support our work, you can become a subscriber by clicking the link in the show notes or by going to longviewinvestigations.com. We'll see you soon. This episode is sponsored by Ground News, the app that helps you spot media bias and see a broader picture of the news shaping our world. Get 40% off their Vantage plan at ground.news/reflector so they know we sent you.